And greetings, happy Friday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Todders and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. We're going to be joined by our White House correspondent, Chris Bedford, here in just a moment. For the first time, he is going to join us here on the Deace Group. Feedback Friday is next hour. We're brought to you by our friends over at Trust and Will. You know, creating a trust and a will can be a very slow, time-consuming process. And let's also be honest, it's not the most comfortable conversations to be having, right? But Trust and Will makes creating your will and your trust easy and time efficient, meaning you can focus on other tasks, and it's very customizable. When we updated our family situation a couple of years ago, Amy used Trust and Will, came back with a rave review before we agreed to talk about him here on the show. We tried him out and became customers ourselves. So we would highly recommend that your family be prepared and protected by managing your Trust and Will with our friends at Trust and Will. They've got an overall rating of excellent, thousands of 5-star reviews over on Trustpilot as well, used by hundreds of thousands of families and counting, including our own. So uncomplicate the process with Trust and Will. Protect what matters most in minutes at trustandwill.com/Deace and get 10% off. That's 10% off at trustandwill.com/Deace. And now it is time for the Deace Group. Your weekly look at the week that was, and there he is. For the first time joining us is Chris Bedford. Hello, Chris. Look at you. I mean, you're wearing a shirt and tie. You are. I mean, you look like you're really on the McLaughlin group that we're ripping off. We've been ripping off for the last 10 years of doing this. I'm wearing a hoodie. Aaron's got a Masters t-shirt on.
Maskers.
Maskers. Yeah. Oh, very nice. Very nice. Okay. And Todd, of course, is Todd. So, Chris, I'm sure you've been briefed. You know the routine. You know what is about to head your way. You're ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
All right, guys, our goal here today is to see if we can take this unflappable reporter who sits there in the corridors of Capitol Hill getting the latest nuggets of information and see if we can make him a little bit more, shall we say, cavalier.
Lowbrow, like us?
A little bit more lowbrow. I like lowbrow. Let's go lowbrow, indeed. In fact, let's get it started with some lowbrow right now. It begins, as it always does, with issue 1. Bleep, Lord Nefarious says.
Don't understand the magnitude of having a child. Well, I'm not the one who admitted they would be okay with killing babies in foster care and killing children that have been abused. That's the point. What I'm saying.
Rosas. I am an immigrant. I am undocumented, unafraid, queer, and unashamed.
I had to go around the country and educate people about what immigrants do for this country, or the fact that we are a country of immigrants.
Right.
The fact is, ain't none of y'all trying to go and farm right now. We done picking cotton.
You have your own opinion. Just because. Hey.
Understand, chaos is its own form of terror.
He just wants to extort what he can from countries, from law schools, from universities, from law firms. That's what he does.
It's the same level of uncertainty I felt 5 years ago during COVID.
The amount of money people have in their pockets and their livelihoods on something as vital as this, yes, it leaves you agape.
We believe in merit.
We're back with Senator Bernie Sanders. I want to introduce Grace Thomas. She's a local civil rights attorney. She's a Democrat. Grace?
They them pronouns, actually. Thank you.
Oh.
It's sort of a vestige of, I think, post-slavery laws where black people had to prove their right to vote. Less voter ID laws allows more people to vote.
Everyone, especially on your side, on the left, is freaking out.
I'm not on the left.
But at the end of the day, listen, this whole concept... All right, Jay, thank you.
And I watched the issue of lumber. Now, you see, we get so much of our lumber, our 2x4s, from Canada. What's where we get it from? Canada. Canada. We get our newsprint from up there for newspapers. The fact is what are we going to do? Have more lumber made in the United States now? What is our plan now? Oh, we're not going to import wood, so we're going to make more wood? We're going to create more wood? Is that it? I don't think we are in a position to simply replicate the imports coming into this country with our own products. It can't always be done. And I think if a wood's example of that, wood. Are we going to make more wood in this country because of our trade deal?
Wood doesn't grow on trees.
Do we have trees in America, guys? Do we have
We're not allowed to
here?
cut them down.
We're not allowed. Well, that is true, Chris. We have many. We're just not allowed to cut them down. All right, Chris, we're going to go to you.
They're on Broadway.
Chris, we're going to you first as the guest. You get the first crack at this. What was the most wicked abomination that you have laid eyes upon in the last few minutes? What was it?
I guess I was happy to see at the very end of that the representation of the American male. It really does seem like the Democrats are being led perfectly 100% by women, and they're just not leading them exactly in the right direction. It's a lot of interesting thoughts out there, but I think my absolute favorite is an honest liberal. So it's going to be the congressmen who are constantly talking about how we need the Mexicans because they're the new slave labor. We need the Guatemalans. We need the El Salvadorians. They are the new American slave, and there's no one going back to picking cotton, which is actually a good thing because we don't even pick cotton by hand anymore in this country. It makes me think that maybe the congresswoman has not been to a farm lately.
Yeah, she hasn't been a lot of places lately, despite the slang, the talk. She's instead been to private schools and in a fairly well-to-do two-parent home, despite the Cherry Girl Act that she's trying to unload on the rest of the country. Todd, what about you?
Target-rich environment there. There's always been a lot of seething, subservient demons, punching people in the face, throwing glasses of water in a black man's face. But where are they getting their marching orders from? And it's always from somebody that looks like they've got their act together. That is part of the system, that has learned all the rules, that has mastered them, that is part of the Senate, if you will, and ultimately comes to say, I am the Senate. That's Jake Tapper. I'm not of the left. Jake, you...
And he says this unironically.
Yes, coolly, calmly, doesn't get fazed, but he embodies the left. Because just when that statement, the lie, is as deep as a lie can possibly go. That's who's leading the left. The chaos that comes out with those who buy into it, I mean, they can't control themselves for 2 seconds. But the boss looks like Jake Tapper. That man is evil.
He had a really nasty habit when I was at the Daily Caller of slipping into 23-year-old female reporters' DMs and cursing them out for a mean tweet about him. And he never did this to me. He never once was like, I'm going to kick your butt. But he would absolutely explode on private messages to young women. And my wife, when she worked at CNN, she went through the same thing. He is a deeply troubled person.
Yikes. All right. So Chris came to drop bombs, Aaron. Got to match that. All right, go ahead.
So one more takeoff, because that was going to be mine as well. So I'll choose my second favorite. But whatever was left of Jake Tapper's T-level disappeared with, I can't remember who was that he was interviewing. It was, I think, the Ag, Brooke Rollins, I think that was who he was interviewing.
Yes, our Secretary of Ag. Secretary of Ag, yes.
That whatever testosterone he had left in his system just completely evaporated with that response, because that was the perfect ball-crushing response. Okay, Jake. This was the Jennifer Lawrence gif. Okay. That was perfect. Love that. Thank you, Brooke Rollins. So probably the runner-up is, man, both of you took my number one and number two, because I made the joke, hey, here's a cotton picking update, or who will pick the cotton update, and then frickin' Jasmine Crockett just took the joke away. She said it in real life. So let's just go with the unhinged woman at the very beginning of the montage, who was being interviewed by a live action reporter, who knows what led up to that debate, in that inflection point of that debate. But that is a perfect illustration of the seething rage that the baby killers have for humanity. I'm not winning this debate. I'm going to pop you in the face physically. Not rhetorically. I can't win this debate, so I'm going to try to destroy you.
You can't beat him.
That's the perfect illustration of the rage within the baby killers.
I mean, we can quantify this. Who was it? Who produced the poll this week that we talked about earlier this week, Aaron? Chris, did you see this poll? 50%.
Oh yes. So it was some foundation, but it was intersected with Rutgers University.
Okay, so associated with Rutgers. Okay, so 50% of leftists say it's okay to assassinate Trump. 48% of leftists say it's okay to assassinate Musk. Did you see that poll earlier this week?
I live it all the time. I live it in Washington, D.C. I mean, I used to have chaos spikes and plaid pants, much to the embarrassment of my parents, and I never got as many mean looks and vicious, hateful looks as I have anytime I've ever worn a MAGA hat on July 4th or anything like that. I mean, that is if you want to be really punk rock, that is the new middle finger. And they don't really know how to respond except with violence. And it's strange, effeminate violence. That was actually in that video the strongest punch I have seen from a liberal man in a year.
Look at the exit question on a scale of 1 to 10. With 1 being the odds our lovely sister and colleague Jill Savage will ever have to worry about being sexually harassed by Lindsey Graham. And 10 being the odds, it is to the shame of a self-proclaimed red state like South Carolina that it continues to allow such an effeminate betrayer to represent in the United States Senate. Rank this week's level of total depravity 1 to 10. Chris, what do you think?
I don't think there's any shot Jill Savage has to worry about Lindsey Graham. I think that she'll be quite safe from his predilections.
Yes. So are you a 10 based on the montage? Is that a 10? Is that a 10?
I think that fits a 10.
That's a 10. All right, 10. What are you at? Where are you at, Todd?
10.
You're at a 10?
10.
Aaron, 10. All right. Hey, folks, before we get to issue 2, our friends over at Angel Pictures, their new film hits theaters nationwide today. Looking forward to it just in time for Palm Sunday weekend, Holy Week next week. It's the brand new offering from Angel Pictures, The King of Kings. And I know what you're thinking. How many times do we have to do the story of Christ? Well, I don't know if you just watched Aaron's montage. We haven't done it enough. It's pretty clear we need to do it at least a few more times. Can I get a witness on that? All right. So I love how they're doing this one. And so the MacGuffin here is maybe the greatest storyteller in Western tradition, Charles Dickens. He is telling the story of Christ to his child. And we get to eavesdrop and watch this story play out on the big screen in theaters nationwide. Folks, this has an all-star cast: Pierce Brosnan, Oscar Isaac, Kenneth Branagh, Uma Thurman, Ben Kingsley. There's a lot of Academy Award nominations and wins inside of that voice cast. So you don't want to miss it. Get your tickets now at angel.com/Steve. I was looking at some screenings, maybe going tomorrow night. It's usually Masters weekend is usually my get the yard back and ready for summer weekend because I can just list it in the Masters on my phone while I get the yard work done. So I'm like, maybe I'll go see this tomorrow night. And I was looking at the theaters here in town, man, there's a lot of seats already sold out. So do not hesitate. All right. Angel.com/Steve. That's angel.com/Steve. Get your tickets today for The King of Kings. And let's get to issue 2. All right, Chris, you're here for a reason. You're going to settle a bar bet, all right, between our friend Daniel Horowitz and I. All right, can Chris settle this debate between us and Daniel?
Here is what good friend of the show, Daniel Horowitz, says President Trump should be spending his political capital on.
Steve, do you know what our biggest export is? Do you know what it is?
War.
Our biggest export is debt, the Treasury.
Well, I was going to guess that, but I figured that you meant something like a tangible good, but okay.
Yeah, so tangible goods, I think it's minerals, oil is about $325 billion a year. I think last year debt probably would have been, foreign nations and investors would have been about $500 billion. And that's what's crowding out buying real substance. So we're demanding that people buy that from us, but then we want to set the rates at 0. So I'm sure you saw the big news over the last 24 hours is that after all this, what was one of the big goals? Bring down the 10-year Treasury. It went up. And you know why it went up? Because we didn't fix the other problems. The fiscal deficit is the bigger issue in either direction than a trade deficit. That is the problem. And to me, what I would yell at them with is the bigger issue than what he did or is evolving with trade is that he is strong-arming conservatives like never before to adopt a piece of SHIT, Senate bill, that adds $5.8 trillion to the debt and another $500 billion in new spending in return for a promise to cut at least $4 billion, 0.004% of the projected $89 trillion budget over 10 years. So you can't have it both ways. If you love the Medicaid and you love the debt and you love the welfare state, then you ain't going back to 1800s where we subsisted on tariffs.
All right, so Chris, the source of this debate, debate is a term loosely, okay? That's why maybe you could call it a bar bet, all right? That we had with Daniel on our show the other day. I don't think he is saying anything factually wrong, okay, at all. The question is the context in which what he is saying is framed, all right? The source of the disagreement and of our bar bet between him and I is he absolutely believes if he wanted to, okay? And you cover Capitol Hill for a living every day. That's why you're uniquely qualified to maybe settle this bar bet. And I want the audience to know I have no idea what Chris is even going to say. I didn't brief him ahead of time. You guys know we don't brief anybody on anything ahead of time. It's the Steve Deace Show. We just turn on the mic and wing it. All right? So I have no idea what you're going to say, okay? But the source of the bar bet is that Daniel believes if he wanted to, given the amount of political capital that he has, that Trump could move the Congress to the right on these fiscal issues to be more hawkish, to be closer to where the Freedom Caucus is. But he just doesn't want to, okay? And he wants to be seen as the furthest right entity in the party, so you can't ever go any further right than he is willing to go, all right? I don't necessarily believe that. Now, I don't think that Trump is like, has a PhD from the Milton Friedman Institute. I don't think that either, okay? But I also think that Trump does not have as much capital overall with the bureaucracy and the never-ending swamp in Washington, D.C., particularly as a lame ducker at 78 years old, where if we lose the next year's midterm elections, much of his presidency is pretty much over the first Wednesday in November, Chris. All right, he's got to get as much done as he possibly can this year. Okay, because next year they've got to hold on in the midterms. Otherwise, he's a lame duck on the first Wednesday in November of next year. So I don't think he necessarily has the political capital to do that. His first term taught us that anytime he tried to rely on the Republican Party for anything, it didn't happen except for a tax cut. Everything good he did himself. I think that's why he's come out so aggressive, way more aggressive and prepared in this term than he did his first, because he learned his lesson. I've just got to be Thanos here and just put on the gauntlet and do it myself, okay? So settle this bar bet for us. Or maybe you think it's not as simple as our bar bet. The floor is yours.
So I've long considered myself the authority on settling all bar bets, although the people I'm usually arguing with sometimes will disagree with that. And this is before Google, when I started tending bar. I think it leans closer to what you're saying, Steve, on this. We are in the last week have seen where the limits are of President Trump's power. And the reason why we saw where those limits were on tariffs and on the budget is because those are the first places he's really tried to exercise his power over the Congress in that way, aside from private phone calls and different promises made or different appointments that he was potentially able to make. Now, he has a lot of ability to influence the House of Representatives, and he strongly has. I mean, the majority of the U.S. Congress now came to Washington, D.C., either the year Donald Trump first ran for office and won, or any year after that. So most of the Republican Congress and the Democratic Congress is born, shaped, and knows everything about politics from a post-Donald Trump world and has to operate in it. The Senate's very different. That's a place where if you stay there long enough, you start there early enough, you get free daycare. And if you stay there long enough, you get free funeral care. And that seems to be the plan for most senators. It's much slower moving. It's much slower turnover. It's kind of shocking where they get their news. I'm convinced that most of them just have their staff. Actually, one of them even told me they do this. Have their staff compile a list of all their mentions and different newspaper articles and hand them to them in the morning. And that's all of the news that they get. They don't actually even know what's going on in the House of Representatives. They often don't know what's going on in other senators. And that's the way they operate. So Donald Trump's ability to push them around is a lot more difficult. I mean, some of them are extremely transactional, and you can do that. Some of them you can sideline, like Mitch McConnell. But his ability to actually push the Senate is more difficult. So it's a hard place for him to spend that capital when he's got so much to do on the executive side. But I do think that, exactly to Horowitz's point, the fact that our major export is our dollars is an awful thing. And that those dollars come back and buy homes, which make it so first-time home buyers are competing with Chinese factory owners who need a place to park their money, is insane. It makes everything cost more. It's made the middle class unattainable. And if he can get Congress to back him on not a 125% tariff, but a 60% tariff on China, push the Democrats into that hard spot, that'd be one of the most useful things they could have possibly done, because that's the sort of thing that will recalibrate the fact that America just sends out their paper goods, their paper dollars, and we expect to get all this crud from the world, and is completely gutting our economy.
All right, I want to make sure that's a great answer, because it largely assessed the situation similar to me. Okay. And it left me some ink. But I want to be as fair as I can to one of my absolute best friends, because I can hear him screaming in my mind's eye, because we have all these conversations privately. Okay. So while we have time, at least one redirect back to you, Chris, that I know Daniel would say if he were here. If he cannot move the Senate substantially in the direction I'm talking about, how did he get almost all of his cabinet appointments approved and in record time? Because I think a lot of us would not have predicted in December, when a lot of these names rolled down on shows like this. We loved him, but that really the only guy he wouldn't get was Dave Weldon, a former member of Congress. Okay, that by and large everybody else he managed to get through. So there's clearly some capital there with the Senate. So what's the response to that, Dave? Or I'm sorry, Chris. What would be the response to that redirect if Daniel were here?
Oh, I think that's right. That showed the heightened ability over the Senate that he's ever had previously, but also those are in confirmations that were personal preferences. The Republicans got a massive uprising from their from their base, as well as from President Trump, who actually kind of worked it kind of quietly. He let his foot soldiers attack these senators and scare them. And they had to pick what was the hill to die on, and decided at that point Trump Immortal was not someone to fight on whether or not RFK or Tulsi Gabbard got through. But there are things that they will fight tooth and nail on, and that's their ability to appropriate. Remember the last time that Donald Trump was impeached was over their jealous guarding of their ability to appropriate money to Ukraine. That's basically the only congressional duty and oversight duty that the Senate takes seriously anymore, is where they can send their money and how much they're going to send and how many perks they're going to get to their home state and give to their allies abroad. And that is a place where, much more than in confirmations, you'll see actual spines.
Final thing then, Chris, and I'll bring Todd and Aaron in a minute. It sounds like then that you would actually say to Daniel, a better criticism would be that Trump should be more aggressive in these primaries against these Senate Republicans, where he does have the groundswell of the base. And in certain red states like Texas with a Ken Paxton against Cornyn, South Carolina, if he picks somebody from the legislature that had his backing, for example, and enough respect with the grassroots, he could take a Lindsey Graham and a John Cornyn out. That's maybe where he should have spent more of his capital preemptively. It sounds like you think that criticism is maybe more warranted.
Yes, I think that is more warranted. And that's one of the places where Trump doesn't operate so well. Lindsey Graham can be a thorn in his side for 3 straight years, and then it's election year, and Lindsey wants to do nothing at all except for be the sweetest Lindsey you've ever seen. And he'll go up there on the TV and he'll show up on Hannity and say all the right things, and Trump will forgive him. I mean, that's one of the facets of Donald Trump, is basically everyone except for Jeff Sessions is allowed back into the fold if they apologize and do good for him. And that's something that has been used sometimes to his detriment. But it's also not working as well this time. The first term, you were able to get under Donald Trump's skin with media stories about, you would have easily been able to get under his skin about Elon Musk, for example, being a co-president.
Yep.
He seems to have wised up to a huge amount of those games, and I don't think he'll be quite as easily pushed around ever again.
Yeah, they tried Operation Yoko Ono. They kicked that in January 21st. They tried to do that on the Elon Musk thing, and it didn't work. All right, so Todd, you heard what Chris had to say. Floor is now yours. What do you think?
Yeah, see, if this was about strict economics, Daniel would be right at the end. the debt. You can't have it both ways, the debt and running it on tariffs. But as I've said, going all the way back to 2017, I never thought he was just doing strict Milton Friedman stuff. This wasn't strict economics. Steve, you said as much in a tweet recently at the very end when you signed off on the hard part about playing chicken is knowing when to flinch. You know how much I love that from Hunt for Red October. This is classic art of the deal. Donald Trump is not married to any particular economic model. He found a wedge that he can use to play the game of chicken that he's always loved to play in Manhattan. Now he wants to do it into the entire world to bust up this nonsense. But listen, why should he should be allowed to play this game effectively because it's never been the strict. Here's where Daniel, I think, would agree and needs to recognize it's never been strict economics on their side. All of the so-called free traders have been either full of it or lying the entire time too. Because how is it free trade when 170 other nations that we work with get tariffs and we don't have the same logic applied to them as it does to us? How is it really free trade if we're constantly shipping all of our jobs overseas and gut out our inner cities and our infrastructure? Because the Sabbath was made for man, not made for the Sabbath. These aren't just widgets. A flat screen TV is not a human job, and we've been treating it like it is. So I'm all with Donald Trump on using his game of chicken, playing it this way, and breaking up this nonsense.
All right, Aaron, what say you?
Yeah, I think we're just seeing a pattern repeated, which is what can I do in the fastest possible way to effect actual real world change? And I think President Trump has made up his mind that expending his political capital on a tariff war with China, who is not just a trading partner, they are a geopolitical threat, is the way to spend his political capital. Because I think there are unknowns and there are variables. We don't know what will happen tomorrow or next week. But in terms of what he can control, this has the biggest impact in real world change, at least potential anyway, as opposed to trying to work the Senate, trying to work the House of Representatives, which is going to be a generational fight. You're not going to be able to get that done in 4 years. It's just not going to happen. Not to say that this isn't a two-way street here. Totally agree that we need President Trump to get involved in the primaries, pick and choose his spots as much as possible. Definitely a two-way street. And I'm not saying just give up on the Congress. But in terms of his calculation, this is where he's planting his flag. He's talked about this for 40 years. He's finally doing it. And I talked about earlier this week, he had one of two options. He had the unilateral option or the multilateral option. The unilateral option is what we just saw play out over the last week and a half. Yeah, there were some things that were going to get busted. Yeah, there were some unforeseen circumstances, but it created a sense of urgency to get to the juncture where we are right now. The multilateral approach, playing diplomacy, that could take years. He decided to do it this way, do it his way. And now we have to see and watch this play out. But Todd is absolutely correct. What we've been sold as free and enterprise is really not free, nor is it really enterprise. And I totally agree with the sentiment as we're watching these tariffs roll out. We should not be, it's a centrally planned economies are a bad thing. Totally agree with that, which is why I would like to get out of China's centrally planned economy once and for all.
Hey, there it is.
There you go. All right, exit question here. And I'll take exit questions I never thought I was going to ask at any point heading into this administration for $1,000, Alex, but here we are. Okay. True or false? Scott Bessent has been a pleasant surprise, and RFK Jr. a surprise disappointment in the first quarter of the Trump presidency. And again, the fact I can unironically even contemplate this blows my mind. I'd like to go back just 3 months ago and even say this was going to be an exit question at any point on the Deace Group, let alone only 3 months in. But I do think it is something to at least consider after the events of this week in particular. True or false on this? Or you can just say true. The question has no even merit to even be asked. Aaron.
I think it's true so far. And 3 weeks from now, 3 months from now, we could have a different message. But Scott Bessent, from the word go, has been a calm, consistent messenger for Trump's trade policy in America first, something that I did not see coming. So, again, based on what we know today, this day, April 11th, I would say this is a true axiom. And I think RFK has, at best, been very inconsistent.
I mean, from our camp, Bessent was the appointment hated the most, and RFK was the one loved the most, right? What do you think? Todd?
I think it is a fair question after this week, as you say. I would still say false, even though you asked me point blank a couple days ago about the criticism. Much warranted over what he just said, that slip up. But he's fighting one of the great dragons of our time.
We got 30 seconds, Chris. You true or false on this?
I'm kind of a mix there. I'm still holding up hope for RFK. And if he comes down and is able to actually isolate and figure out some of the factors that are leading to the spikes in autism, that's going to be an absolute game changer for America.
Yes.
And Scott Bessent, if he gets this deal done the right way and doesn't just make it cheaper to sell iPhones and Teslas in China, then he's a hero.
More in a moment. Stay tuned. Back here on the Steve Deace Show, brought to you by our friends over at Patriot Mobile. We've talked about them for a while now. So you probably already know that for years they've stood in the gap for every American that believes freedom is worth fighting for. They are the real deal. So why haven't you switched yet? Our family finally did. We haven't looked back. You should join us. You get access to all of the 3 major networks out there. You can switch at any time within their main hub that you want for free. By being a member, you get an outstanding 100% U.S.-based customer service team. They will customize your needs as best, or to your needs as best as they can. Upgrade your phone, switch your phone, keep your number, switch your number. All those things they can manage for you. If you got multiple lines, they can, again, piecemeal it by line, by account within your family's needs. And right now, if you're still locked into a contract, not a problem. Patriot Mobile's contract buyout program covers up to $500 per device. You can't beat that. The contract buyout program covers up to $500 per device. So get started today with a free month of service when you go to patriotmobile.com/Steve. That's patriotmobile.com/Steve, or call 972-PATRIOT, or just go to patriotmobile.com/Steve. All right, let's welcome back in our Washington, D.C. based correspondent here at the Blaze, Chris Bedford, as we continue on with your weekly look at the week that was. Let's get to issue 3. Disney's problems mount.
Is Disney in trouble? Their much ballyhooed live-action remake of Snow White was an epic flop, looking like it's on pace to be one of the biggest financial disappointments in Hollywood history. An epic flop. Epic flop. Both those words give Disney execs the heebie-jeebies because their theme park rival Universal is about to open this.
5 immersive worlds. One amazing theme park.
Epic Universe is set to open in Orlando next month, and early bird sneak peek reviews have been over the top and overwhelmingly positive with the same message: Disney World is in trouble. And then you add in Gina Carano's lawsuit against Disney, which is gaining steam as a court this week granted a motion for discovery, meaning the company has to turn over information about how other stars on the Disney Plus show The Mandalorian were compensated. The happiest place on earth? Not even close.
The discovery potential of the Carano lawsuit. We'll get right into all of the political machinations of Disney, because that's why she was like, oh, we only have this lawsuit because of that. So, I mean, that is a loaded gun for Disney in terms of terrible headline potential. The discovery process there. Aaron mentioned Universal. Snow White may not even generate $100 million domestic. One of the biggest flops in not just Disney history, Hollywood history. Chris, going back to the Black Cauldron in 1985, Disney had not had a film fail to generate a profit at the box office from either its main hub or Pixar or any of its subsidiaries until 2022 was the next time it happened. This is now the 5th film it has made in the last 4 years. 22, 23, 24, and 25. Snow White is. That will not be a profitable film. All right, so given all of this, are we watching Disney go the way of IBM? I mean, there was a period of time 30, 40 years ago in this country, the idea that IBM wouldn't be there anymore. You know, Ma Bell wouldn't be there anymore. People looked at you, with both eyes in the same socket, like you're an idiot, you're a moron, you're retarded. And yet, there's no Ma Bell, there's no IBM. Are we watching this happen to Disney right now, potentially? What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is actually happening potentially in real time. It's so much capital to squander. That's one of the things that they have going for them. They've got 100 years of goodwill that have been built up, which is much more helpful than anything that IBM actually had. They've got that legacy. There's things that they can tap into. They've got the fact that if I want to show my kids television cartoon shows that don't have 50 different flashes on the screen per second, I can still put on Robin Hood, or I can still put on The Sword and the Stone, or even later stuff like Aladdin can still put that on. They've got all of that. So they've always got the opportunity to come back. At least they still do right now. But this doubling down, this tripling down on completely failed ideas, that things that have been rejected by the consumer, rejected by Republicans, obviously, but rejected by independents. We started to be rejected by Democrats at the same time. I think what they need very much is the structure to be able to get out of this trouble. They need the DOJ. They need lawsuits like this. They need the lawyers to be able to come into the room and tell the executives, you're not allowed to do that.
Give them the cover you're talking about because they can't do it on their own. Is that what you're saying? They need a third party to threaten them so they have the cover to get out from underneath this because they won't do it on their own. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think a huge amount of America's corporate CEOs need that cover where they can say, listen, guys, I love you. I'm not a fascist. I'm not on your side. But we're just not allowed to ever do that in the corporate environment ever again. We're not going to do that to kids. And that will give them that path out.
Aaron, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, they are teetering right now. Let's not make any bones about that. We had that John Crist, he's the comedian, doing that little bit earlier this week, pretending to be a Disney Films executive, transplanted to work on their parks now. And that little line that he said, we would build some new rides here and some new attractions if we actually had any intellectual property that people recognize from the past decade and a half. That's actually some brilliant commentary, because what are they going to do to innovate? What are they going to do? I mean, Universal, as far as the theme parks go, I mean, I having been to both in recent years, Universal is just running laps around Disney, and it's mostly just nostalgia right now at Disney World. So they are going to have to change course, and I don't think they have the will nor the desire necessarily to admit. I mean, they're kind of in the position that the CCP is in right now. They can't be seen as weak. They don't want to be seen as weak. So they got to have some sort of off-ramp that still lets them save face while totally pivoting the direction of their company. And so whether that's an external lawsuit, whether that's some other factor, they are going to have to change because they are teetering right now.
That's brilliant analysis, I think, from Chris Todd, which is someone at the Department of Justice, please come after us. All right, to give some wing of our board of directors the political cover they desire to get out from underneath this, to finally refuse all the woke scolds we've hired in our intelligentsia within the corporation. That is brilliant analysis. But what do you think?
And I totally agree with it, but I still doesn't think it. I don't think it makes it as likely as that Disney becomes IBM as some people think it might be, and that's because. When it comes to the men in this culture, we're living in an Aldous Huxley Brave New World. And their constant need to be satiated for stuff like this. Listen, the girls are the ones giving up on Snow White. The guys, it's going to be much, much harder to pull this stuff out of their hands. And I think if we're looking in the mirror, we just have to be honest about that. They're the ones who are the true addicts of this stuff these days. The girls apparently are fine walking away from it. The guys will keep paying the bills on the mediocrity.
Let's that's an interesting point as well. And there is evidence. And in fact, that is an excellent segue to the exit question, as a matter of fact. All right. So exit question. Will reuniting the team, both the Russo brothers and the cast, will reuniting the team that did Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, could it end up, and that's as soon as next year, they're filming right now, in fact, could that save Disney from itself, Todd?
And the answer, based on my analysis, is no, because the thing that should have saved Disney from itself is Infinity War and Endgame. This is what I say all the time. The classic principles, good versus evil. Just like Star Wars, people they go see them, and they get off on it, and then they go to real life, and they can't be bothered.
In other words, we should be criticizing Disney for just doing derivatives of that over and over again.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
They're doing them. They're like, Ben, you can't resist this. We know it. This is your crack. And they're right.
Chris, what do you think?
I'm stuck in a hard position where the reality is the only time I would ever watch an Avengers movie is on an airplane, but that would not be a great place to watch an Avengers movie.
Right.
It feels like that needs to be in the big screen, surrounded by sound. But I can tell you that if any course correction is going on, we're publishing something right now at Blaze about the gender explorations in the new movie, and the idea that this 1960s woman is somehow not empowered. I mean, I read comic books when I was a kid. Storm was extremely well empowered, if that's the character we're talking about. She used to beat up military soldiers. She used to sneak around. She would get villains. She would frame people. She used her powers all the time. So it makes me think that, once again, we've got casts that have not actually read the lore.
Yeah, that happens a lot, too. Detesting the subject matter. Yes. Aaron, what do you think?
It should be. I mean, you're bringing back all of the best elements, we think, of the original MCU, which is what we have departed from greatly over the last few years since Endgame. It should be enough to save them, but do they still know how to tell a good story? That's just okay. CGI be damned, production value be damned. I mean, that's important stuff, but can they tell a good story? That's what we need to see, and we'll have the answer. We'll have the answer soon enough.
All right, before we get to our kicker topic, which ties into this as well, don't forget we're trying to make real estate markets great again in America, because we haven't had one in about 5 years between COVID and Let's Go Brandon. It's you don't see as many for sale signs and moving vans as you used to see. So we're trying to bring that back again, but a lot has changed over the last 5 years. So make sure now more than ever you've got an agent you can trust to guide you through that process in these unprecedented times. Thank you, Aaron and Todd. All right, so go to realestateagentsitrust.com. That's realestateagentsitrust.com. There we'll hook you up with an agent that likely comes from right here in the Blaze audience. So you guys have some values and certain tastes in common as well. But what you really care about is that they've got a validated, verified track record of success, which is why we list them in our database and wouldn't recommend them to you if they didn't. Realestateagentsitrust.com is where you want to go first before you go into this new thing, this newfangled thing. They got real estate markets in the neighborhoods today. All right, so realestateagentsitrust.com. All right, kicker topic. What other American enterprise do you think may be an existential peril for over-politicizing itself and, as Chris put it, squandering its political capital? Aaron.
Boy, around this time last year, I might have said Boeing with all of the stuff that was going on with their DEI practices, although I think they just got a big contract, didn't they, for a new fighter? I might be mixing stories.
Yeah, Trump announced that about a month ago. You're right.
And depending on how the trade war plays out, that could be beneficial for Boeing. So I would say this time last year, definitely Boeing.
Todd?
It's college sports. I mean, all these fake talking points about, freedom, liberty, rights, economics. It's the same crackhead stuff I talked about Disney, and it's men doing it.
Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think actually broader sports in general. I remember when sports was not political at all, or it leaned right, and Hank Jr. opened up for the NFL. And then President Barack Obama came into office. People felt like they had to talk about it. It was the cool thing. And they were never, ever, 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 ever able to go back. And it is simply insufferable to turn it on.
Yeah, and the thing is, when you when you watch the games, at least for now, they remain largely untouched by much of this. But all the stuff that leads up to the games, the drama, the melodrama, ratioing, it's fascinating to me that Stephen A. Smith has become the biggest name in sports media in the country right now, largely by injecting himself into his stories. It's not by what he is saying about the athletes and the teams themselves, by making himself the story, which just kind of goes to the narcissism that is, is systemic in our culture today. Well, let's get to predictions. Aaron, I'm going to start with you.
So right before we went on air this morning, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds announced that she is not going to be running for re-election. I am predicting that Iowa Congressman Randy Feenstra will be the next governor of Iowa.
We have to do better than that.
Hope so.
Have to do better than that. I mean, that's not going to work. I've known Randy Feenstra for years. That ain't going to, we're going to have to do a lot better than that. Stunning news, by the way. I will tell you that. We haven't talked about it yet. It broke literally as we were going on the air. I will just tell you as recent as 24 hours ago. And I know a lot of people in Iowa politics. Nobody thought she was not running again. Nobody did. Even people I know that work for the governor. So Very stunning news. And she deserves to go out on top if she whenever she wants. She's the best governor Iowa's ever had, no close second. But we're going to have to do better than Randy Feenstra. I hope so. Promise you that. Todd.
Tariffs will be back page news by June.
Huh. I could see that. I mean, cycles move fast, right?
So the cycles do indeed move fast. And if this is truly about games of chicken, that can be accomplished much quicker than the full range of economics.
Did I see this morning China is now retaliating again with 125% tariffs on their own? But I also saw that as far as chips go, microchips go, they are only tariffing the country where they're not tariffing the countries where those chips are manufactured.
Chris, what's your prediction? Can be on anything.
Geez, I think, unfortunately, as a Capitol Hill reporter, I have the bad news of reporting that we have not heard the last of Mitch McConnell. Over the next few weeks, he is going to be back in action. He's going to be back in the news because he gets to have a big, loud say on appropriations and what happens with this budget. And his last little attack against the nominations will not be his last act.
How lucid is he, Chris, when you're up there on Capitol Hill?
It depends on the day. When he's getting wheeled through the halls, which are hard halls to fall on. I get it. He's not even the only Republican being wheeled around these days in the Senate.
Unbelievable.
He is not always with it. But there are moments, of course, of extreme clarity, just like you see with any aging relative.
My prediction, Aaron preempted it a little bit, but we put this rundown together 2 days ago. So before China announced this morning that they are increasing tariffs from 84% on U.S. goods to, I think it's 125%. But my prediction is China will not just roll over. They're going to have to figure out what looks like a substantive strike back, if for no other reason as to save face and strengthen a negotiating position. They can't just turn right around in response to Trump essentially punking them in the last 48 hours and then send an envoy. There's no margin there. There's no leverage there. You can't, when you're in a playoff series, you're down 3-0. That's not the time to go to the other team and negotiate. The series is basically over. We're just playing out the string. All right. So China's got to figure out something that will allow it to claim some form of win that its sycophants in our media and in a lot of our so-called sacred democracies in the West can help it message and brand as some kind of a win so that they've got something stronger at the negotiating table, which is eventually where I think this will all end up. Good to see you again, Chris, as always. Thank you, brother.
Great
you did great work.
Here.
You bet. You did great, man. You knocked it out of the park. I wasn't sure. The serious straight man, is he gonna get down into the muck and the mire with these three losers? But you did a great job, dude. You showed you could be a loser too. So well done, Chris. Really impressive.
I started on early red eye back in the day when we still got to talk about crack on the air. It was a different age.
All right, man. Good work every day. Follow his stuff, folks. He does great work covering D.C. For us here at the Blaze. Or when we come back, we haven't had one of these in a couple of weeks with various travels and everything else. We got to do a good old-fashioned Feedback Friday like we used to roll back in the day, right?
Yeah.
All right, so that's coming your way here next. Stay tuned. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Todders and Aaron McIntyre and all of you, and you can all, but hopefully not all at once, let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing us steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And then also, please like us right now on Facebook, especially at facebook.com/Steve Deace. There are some preliminary signs that the blockade by Facebook against our page might at least be lessening. Maybe they're at least letting emergency supplies through the siege. Okay, so like us on our new Facebook page, facebook.com/Steve Deace. And then if you love the podcast, thank you so much. You're a big reason why we just signed a 3-year extension with the Blaze a couple of weeks ago. Please hit like rate, subscribe, or follow if you're on Apple iTunes. Thank you guys so much. We continue to kill it right before we went on the air. Our last 2 episodes of the show were 20th and 22nd in one of the largest categories on iTunes, religion and spirituality. So thank you guys very much for that. We really appreciate it and appreciate every single one of those 5-star reviews. Thank you very much. And keep those coming. We appreciate it. And we appreciate our friends over at Fast Growing Trees as well. Did you know they've got the biggest online nursery in the United States with thousands of different plants and over 2 million happy customers? They've got all the plants that your yard needs, like fruit trees, privacy trees, flowering trees, shrubs, and so much more. Whatever plants you're interested in, Fast Growing Trees, they've got you covered. So find the perfect fit for your climate and space at Fast Growing Trees, and they'll make it easy for your dream yard. And they've got they're plant experts. They give you the support and the training you need to help you plan your landscape, choose the right plants, and learn how to care for them as well. And I know what you're thinking, man. There were 6,000 plants. How do I don't even know where to begin. How do I get through that extensive of a catalog? It's very easy to navigate. We've done that at our house as well. They ship it right to your front door too. I mean, they make it as easy and convenient as absolutely possible. And this spring, they've got the best deals for your yard, up to half off on select plants and other deals. And listeners to our show get 15% off their first purchase when using the code DACE at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code DACE at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code DACE. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code DACE. Now's the perfect time to plant. Use DACE to save today. Offer valid for a limited time. Term and conditions may apply. All right, y'all ready for some Feedback Friday?
Absolutely.
All right, let's get it started. Jay writes, I enjoy your show on the whole, but I do have to say Todd somewhat rubs me the wrong way and comes across as smug and arrogant.
Mission accomplished. All done.
Indeed. Didn't we do a thing a few years ago where if we all did our own colognes, right?
Smug.
Yeah, and yours was smug, I believe. Was mine pumpkin spice? I can't remember. I think it was pumpkin spice. It probably. If it wasn't, it should have been.
I just want to know, point of clarification, follow up for next time. What am I smug and arrogant about? Because that's what's crucial. Generally as a rule, we don't do like tones issues. So if it's just about a tone, we need to talk about the substance.
Okay. Because you're right. I mean, you could say, if it's just about a tone, you could say, what are you not smug or arrogant about, right?
Because I guarantee you, if it's about an issue you agree with, you probably love that I'm smug and arrogant about it. So there's a dog that's yelping there about something.
Are you the teammate that if he's on your team, you love? And if he's not, you hate? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, well, that might be true.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that was Bill Lambier, one of my favorite players growing up. I patterned myself after him. I wore his number in high school, number 40. Okay. You know, I mean, I wanted to be known.
There.
2 things I've always wanted to be known as. Okay. I've always wanted to be known as crafty. Only lefties get to be called crafty. That's a crafty right-hander. No one does that. Okay. I want to be crafty. All right. And then number 2, okay, after crafty, I want to be the guy that, boy, I love Steve Deace if he's on my team, but you'd hate him if he wasn't.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's an honor to be called that.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, I strive for that almost daily, except it still hasn't, I still can't even get the people on my own team to say, you'd love having them on your team. Yeah.
I
can't get either side of that equation. I get one side. You just hate them. I get that side of the equation, whether I'm on your team or not.
There's that great line, be the guy who, when his feet hit the ground in the morning, when he's getting out of bed, the devil says, oh crap, he's up.
Yes. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. All right. This is a fun note. All right. Listen to this one from Eric. Okay. I really enjoyed the show you guys did dedicated to Rush's legacy with his brother David a while ago. I was very fortunate and blessed to have known Rush personally. When I was active as an airport line tech and eventually the safety and training supervisor for Stewart Jet Center, now Atlantic Aviation, Rush used to fly into our airport with his Gulfstream jet quite frequently because of our proximity to his home in West Palm Beach. I was quite often the guy taking care of his airplane. I would tow it to a safe spot on our ramp and would usually perform fueling services on it for him as well as anything else he may have needed. He was always very friendly and quite easy to talk to. In fact, one Christmas day, when he flew into our jet center to visit his home in Palm Beach, he came down the stairs from his aircraft and walked over to where I was fueling his plane. He handed me a brand new, still in the box iPhone and said, "Merry Christmas, Eric, and thank you for fueling my aircraft and being here for me on this day." I was absolutely stunned because that was the biggest tip I'd ever received from any private jet customer ever. He was so kind and generous, and if he saw me, he would always come over to where I was and start a conversation. In fact, he had somehow forgotten that same day later if he had given me the phone, so he called his pilot at 3 a.m. and told him, make sure Eric got an iPhone. I don't remember exactly if I gave it to him or not. He had given about 5 of us tech guys these phones that day. So his pilot came over and said, hey, I need you to stand beside me and take a pic with me of the phone Rush gave you so that I can text him back that you got it. He wants verification that you got your gift. That's how conscientious he was and how much he truly cared about the people. So when you guys did your show with his brother, I got to tell you, I cried from the memories of all the times I was fortunate enough to have with Rush. He was a true giant.
That kind of stuff is a real measure of a man.
No doubt.
Mean, right there. That's,
no doubt.
He's doing this. Yes, I have gifts. Yes, perhaps sometimes comes across as smug or arrogant. I think Rush got that complaint many times before.
Yes.
But he's ultimately doing it because he loves God and he loves people. And he's trying to make the world better on their behalf. And that's they're not constructs. There's a real person there doing this real thing for me that I rely upon. I'm going to make sure that I honor him, not just with the phone, but more importantly, the regular conversations, real guy to real guy.
Yeah, a great measure of a man is, especially when we're talking about the elites. How do you treat the little people? The little people. I mean, do you see them as little people or do you see them as real human beings? It's obvious from this story that Rush Limbaugh, an elite, saw the people in his life as real people, regardless if it was fueling up his airplane or otherwise. Great measure of a man.
Jim Musser, or Muser, so I'll pronounce it both ways, Jim, in case I got one of them wrong. He wants to know my thoughts on the abolitionist movement. So for those of you that don't know, I know most of you do, but for those of you that don't know, these are folks who believe it is essentially time to stop trying to incrementally end baby killing in America and just ban it comprehensively without exception and criminalize it as you would any other form of murder. Is that an okay? I mean, there's a little bit more to it, but is that an okay? We good for that description for now?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not sure anymore.
I'm sure if it's not, we'll hear from an abolitionist.
Exactly.
Yes, because they'll let you know, and I respect that. All right. So, Jim, I'll just share with you in the audience what I shared with Jeff Durbin, who's a pastor in Arizona, who's a big leader in this movement. We just had a conversation with Dusty Devers, the state senator in Oklahoma, who is advocating this approach in his legislature. Him and I discussed this in a recent special edition on the show, actually just last Friday, right? Just last week. And then I met a couple of leaders, and forgive me, it's the thing with this photographic memory of mine. It's great with everything but names. It's always been that way, okay? I met a couple of the leaders of the abolitionist movement at NRB in Dallas about a month and a half ago. So let me just reiterate what I said to them in that conversation, and what I've discussed with Dusty on this show last Friday, and what I said to Pastor Durbin when we did a special edition with him last year. In many respects, I view what they are trying to do with abolitionism, pardon me, as similar to the approach I was very involved in about a decade ago, and we called it personhood at the time. And personhood was a strategy that we took out of the original Supreme Court hearing for Roe versus Wade. And one of the justices, I can't remember which justice it was, but one of the justices asks the attorney for NARAL, the National Abortion Action, the National Abortion Rights Action League, asked her, "Hey, what if a state determined a fetus was a person?" And this audio is just on YouTube, and go listen to it for yourself. She kind of nervously giggles and says, "Well, I mean, that would make my case a lot harder to prove if that were to happen." All right. So our approach was just to go right out of the oral arguments from the Supreme Court when this issue was originally determined, and just make that a strategic approach. Let's just simply have individual states determine that a fetus is a person. Right, that the child in the womb is a person. And we were opposed by national right to life in every single state we went to. I'm trying to remember the states. Georgia. It was one of the Dakotas. There were 5 states. Forgive me, I don't remember. I think Oklahoma was one too. But there were 5 states that we went to. Our home state of Iowa, obviously. There were 5 states we went to, and we were opposed by the Catholic Archdiocese and National Right to Life in all of them, every single one of the 5. And the big argument that we were told is that Roe v. Wade, we were told this by the pro-life leaders, that Roe v. Wade is the law of the land, and that what we are risking will actually grow abortion rights. And our counter to that was, well, right now, if a woman claims that without any evidence at all, just walks into any a Planned Parenthood in America and says, I've been raped or guilty of incest, just makes that claim at any point of gestation, just walk in and have her baby killed anywhere in America. I mean, we're one of only a half dozen countries in the world that do late-term abortion. I mean, I'm not sure what ground we've taken that we're risking here. Like, for example, I am concerned that if we do a national 15-week ban, like some of the national pro-life groups do or want, I am concerned if we do that, well, some of the pro-life laws in places like our home state of Iowa, or especially Ron DeSantis' Florida, which has the toughest pro-life law in the country right now, I'm concerned those laws are way before 15 weeks. Well, I'm concerned if we set a federal standard at 15 weeks, the abortionists, the baby killers, should just come back against all of our states and say, hey, we've got a federal standard here, 15 weeks. We got to overturn Iowa and Florida, and I think Alabama's ban is tougher too, Mississippi's. We have to overturn these. Now, I might be wrong about that. That's my concern. I'm willing to be convinced otherwise, but I am concerned about that. But in this argument, we had no ground. We had won nothing. We didn't even ban late-term partial birth abortion in Carhart versus Gonzalez. That essentially we just banned one method of it. We told the Nazis they could use Zyklon A, but they couldn't use Zyklon B. So we had really accomplished squat, politically, legislatively, jack squat, actually, for decades. Nothing. So I didn't understand the counter argument of what ground we had taken that we were now risking by going for the gold medal. Making the perfect the enemy of the good, so to speak. There was some infighting and other things that went on with that movement, and it just kind of broke apart. And we eventually there was eventually a compromise struck between the personhood people, some of them that still remained, and the traditional pro-life leadership. And the compromise is how you got your heartbeat bills. And we made that deal here in Iowa. We were one of the first states to do one of those. All right. Well, can we at least define when there is a life? All right. If you guys won't go with us, that life begins at conception. By any medical practice in the civilized world, the first thing we always check in any triage situation is for a pulse, for a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. We all agree that signifies life. Could we at least do that? Okay. That was the compromise. And we did get the traditional pro-life groups to come aboard on that compromise and help us push that across the finish line. And that's how you got Roe versus Wade overturned. Is enough of states passed those kinds of bills that it brought the question of Roe to the court. Because that was my other argument that people like me made in the personhood movement a decade ago. Well, you guys say Roe versus Wade is the law of the land. You also tell us we can't do anything meaningful until Roe versus Wade is overturned. You're going to have to craft something then that would challenge Roe on the merits. We haven't done that since Casey versus Pennsylvania in 1991. Well, then you're telling us we can do nothing. We just have to keep letting them kill kids. We can't do anything because of Roe, but we can't challenge Roe. Then what are we even doing at all other than a parade in January every year? Now, right now, all the abolitionists are nodding their heads saying, word, 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 testify. Okay? Now we're going to get to the part where you guys are going to hate me. The problem I have with the abolition strategy, and I have said this to Pastor Jeff, and you can go back and I'm not going to, that show was months ago. Just go back into our archives, find it. You can hear what Pastor Durbin says. He's a smart guy. Here, go find it yourself, hear what he has to say. You can go into last Friday and hear what Dusty says, when I bring this up to him. All right. My concern strategically is if we attempt to criminalize the killing of children before we can even acknowledge their children. Folks, we just had a story in my home state of Iowa yesterday. The largest hospital system in my state is the Catholic Mercy Hospital System.
Yep.
They are arguing right now in Iowa court that a fetus is not a person. The largest Catholic hospital system in the state of Iowa is arguing this in court right now, that an unborn child is not a person. That is the absolute, not even technical, straight up argument they're making. And in their filing, they're saying if the court finds an unborn child is a person, it really complicates a lot of our practices. It's right in their own filing. Todd, am I exaggerating any of this?
Oh, no.
And this was in the Des Moines Register yesterday. It was big news in our state. The largest Catholic hospital in Iowa is arguing that a preborn child is not a person in a court of law. So if we try to criminalize something before we even acknowledge what a person is, what came first? You got prosecuted for being a slave trader, or we ended the slave trade? What came first? We ended the slave trade. Then we prosecuted the slave traders. Because by what standard would we be able to articulate what they were doing was bad? First, we had to articulate the standard. Then you uphold said standard once it's articulated. If we jump right to the question of prosecuting people that take part in the murder of unborn children, we are going to walk right into the argument that the other side wants to have. The other side wants to argue about the woman. They do not want to discuss the child. They want to make the entire thing about the woman. Even though the idea that the only kinds of women nowadays are ones that are like my mom when she considered aborting me. Teenage, unwed, pregnant, scared, poor. That's still probably the majority of abortions, but we are rapidly approaching the era of shout your abortion. I'm proud of what I did. Yes, I know it's murder. I mean, what did Bill Maher just say a month ago or whatever on his show? Yes, I know it's murder, but we've got too many rugrats, so just do it anyway. We're getting to we're if we're not yet at the Marquis de Sade position, we're really close to that being the official position of the baby killing industry now. Nevertheless, they want to argue about the woman. They do not want to argue about the baby. Our argument is the baby. They want to argue about the woman. If you do not establish when life begins and then you try to prosecute a standard before that is established, again, this is my opinion, and since you asked it of me, brother, I'm going to give it to you. And since it's the Steve Deace Show, I get paid to give it. My analysis is someone that has been in the dude, I've been in the mosh pit of pro-life legislative crafting. I went to the signings. I was one of the people that personally signed Iowa's heartbeat bill. Okay? That's part of the pro-life leadership consortium at the legislature. I have been in the mosh pit of battling this issue. I don't ever get invited to the march every January, so I don't get to vamp on camera. But I've actually been in the mosh pit. I've actually gotten my hands dirty. And with that, my experience with this is, if we jump right to what do we do to moms who kill their kids before we win the argument that is a kid, we will have the argument that people who want to kill all the kids want to have. They do not want to argue about the child. They want to argue about the woman. Why is the number one determiner of how someone is going to vote today marital status? I mentioned that the other day. In the Trump era, he has won married people across the board. Just married versus unmarried. He's won them in all three presidential elections. Well, unmarried people are more inclined to want to do what? Well, who wants to murder their children more, guys? Married or unmarried women? This is a pretty simple one. What do you got?
Unmarried.
Unmarried one. And it's not even freaking close. It's not even freaking close. Unmarried women have essentially said, turn the country communist, turn my son, turn my brother into a sister, turn my sister into a brother. Let my other sisters get raped by illegal aliens and bankrupt the country so that I can kill as many babies as I want to kill. That's essentially the political bargain. We just had an election where every commercial Democrats ran was what? Exactly what I just said was the pitch they just ran on. That's the only issue they really offered the country. Come with us if you want to kill your kids. I think it is strategically dubious to argue about the woman before we win the argument about the child. Now, I could be wrong. You're welcome to argue and welcome to disagree. I have platformed numerous abolitionist perspectives on this show. The video series we showed last year that we thought was very captivating, that was produced by an abolitionist group, I believe out of Canada, I think is where they're from. So I am not unfriendly. I recognize ultimately the place we want to get to here is that this is comprehensively banned. So I'm arguing strictly on a strategic basis. I don't think this strategy will be successful in the current environment. I don't. So that's my answer.
A lot of that has to do with you and beating the drum over and over again about needing to take the courts back, because the same slog you're talking about, I mean, a good result would be like a 50-50 slog. Because look what you've laid out. Who gets more rights these days? A raping member of a drug gang or an innocent child in the womb? You just said that a couple of days ago, right? Same thing.
Right now in our federal court system, an innocent child fully developed, whose pinky finger cuticle is dangling from its mother's womb while the rest of his body is out into the open air, has less of a right to step on American soil than a Venezuelan drug lord does. That's not even a euphemism. That's not even an exaggeration. That is a fact. That is a literal fact of where we are.
Transgenderism, we clearly have some political momentum, but that still remains to be seen how that's going to play out in the courts. The defining of what we thought were obvious terms. We can't even do the man and the woman thing right. So I think you're correct about that. I also is there a Book of Joshua conversation ultimately we need to have about abortion, which is an entire different conversation, but about like we have to do the best that we can to save everybody we can. Mm-hmm. But at some point, that blood is not on our hands.
Yes, and at some point you do have to have the choose ye this day, and the abolitionists are like, if this isn't the point now, then when? And I'm sympathetic to that. Again, I could be wrong. But I've interviewed two of the people whose intellects are probably the most respected. I genuinely liked them. I listened to their perspective, and with all due respect to both Jeff and Dusty, it did not persuade me off of the opinion I just gave you. But again, I'm open to being wrong. I mean, I'll say this to the abolitionist. Eventually, and who knows how long eventually is, 6 months from now, 10 years from now, I don't know. But eventually you're going to be correct, because there really is no leadership on the other side now. It has no plan. It's vacuous. It doesn't really have any standing. Okay. There really is no critical mass of counter leadership to your approach right now. You know, where all these pro-life bills we're fighting in all these state legislatures right now to incrementally regulate and roll it, it's not happening. Okay. So your day is going to come. Might already be here. We'll find out. But I'm just telling you, my own strategic opinion as someone with a lot of experience in this space doesn't mean it's right. I could be wrong. Is if we argue about the women, they win. And if we argue about the baby, we do. I can't make it any simpler than that.
Does politics flow downstream from culture or vice versa? That's been a debate that we have had for a long time. People fall on different opinions. I'm kind of the both. I mean, you look at what Obergefell and I mean, we went from Obergefell to, hey, should creepy dudes be allowed to go into your daughter's restrooms with them? Mm-hmm. We went from that at a breakneck speed. Here's kind of what I hear you saying. To me, it's a both and anymore. It's just kind of like it goes around and around and around. Okay. You're trying to have the political argument at the cultural level, at the cultural engagement level, when you should be having the cultural argument at the granular level. The argument you should be making in terms of trying to win hearts and minds in the culture is the baby, not the woman. Because then the defense mechanisms, if you do it the latter, the defense mechanisms pop up. You're giving them an easy out. That's the way I see it. So again, don't have political conversations, law conversations when you're trying to win hearts and minds. What's going to capture hearts and minds, in my opinion, the best chance that you have to do that, to make an emotional connection is what about the baby?
Mm-hmm.
What about the baby? Make them answer that question.
Folks, we are, experiencing some economic stability right now. And did you know, though, that President Trump specifically exempted gold and silver bullion from those sweeping tariffs? So while these new policies may be triggering some significant financial uncertainty in some sectors, the administration is still protecting and preserving your ability to diversify into precious metals. So if you're concerned about your savings, I encourage you to have a free consultation with Birch Gold's precious metals specialist. The first step right now to getting there is to text Steve to 989-898. That way you can receive your free, no obligation info kit on gold and learn how to hold gold and silver in a tax-sheltered account. And Birch Gold will even help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a gold IRA with no money out of pocket. All right, so Birch Gold, they've got an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of thankful customers. So text my name, Steve, to the number 989-898. Again, text Steve to 989-898 to claim your free info kit right now. Let me also say this. Sometimes you just do the right thing regardless if there's a strategy to it or not.
Of course.
But here's the thing. You don't always just do the right thing regardless of a strategy. That's not biblical either. There are numerous instances in the scriptures where Jesus performs a miracle. And then he turns to the person he did it for. What does he say? Hey, keep this on the down low. Hey, just keep this between us. And now's not the right time. Does Jesus show up from day one in the Gospels with a Messiah muscle shirt? Is he wearing a Messiah hat on day one? A bright red Messiah hat. Is he doing that? So there is a time and a place for strategy. But there's also a time and a place where the strategy is the right thing just has to be done, period, because of the level of evil we're up against. That's why I think this is a good conversation to be having. And I'm not claiming I've got the market cornered on it at all. Where I'm going to be a lot different than a lot of the other mainline pro-life leadership that hates my guts too, is I'm at least going to entertain and listen to what you guys have to say and try to engage you and understand where you're coming from. I'm not here to get anybody to tone anything down or whatsoever at all. You simply asked my opinion, and that is my opinion. I think we have to win the argument about what is a life first. And I think when I'm sitting in my own backyard right now, and my largest Catholic hospital system is in Iowa courts arguing that an unborn child has no rights as a non-human, literally arguing that. They're hearkening back to a 1971 pre-Roe law that says a non-living being has no rights. That's literally the court precedent they're citing in their filings. So I think it's too early for this conversation. But again, I'm open to being wrong. Frankly, I'd like to be. I just currently don't think that I am. More of your feedback here on the Feedback Friday here in a moment. Hey, imagine having your family's entire beef supply delivered right to your door for a year. Now, hold on, you're thinking. Sounds great, man, but where do I have room for all that meat? That's why I haven't done it before. I mean, I'm in Iowa. You don't think I have friends that have offered me like whole cow? Of course, many times. But you look around and you're like, where would I store all of that? Well, how about the whole cow sale from our friends over at Backyard Butchers? You'll get an entire steer's worth of meat, but delivered monthly across the year, over 12 months. All right. That's pasture-raised Texas beef, not the mystery stuff in the big box stores. All right. And no need to stress about that freezer space that have your wife giving you the side eye. Okay. Each month you receive a curated selection, freshly butchered and packed. Free shipping, no extra fees, no surprise charges. Also no hormones, no antibiotics, no mRNA vaccines. Just clean, Texas-born and raised, all natural beef. And it comes monthly. So you don't have to worry about where you're going to store that all year long. All right. So if you want to feed your family with high quality Texas beef without the runaround, check out Backyard Butcher's Steer in a Year subscription. All right, we're talking freezer filler beef with rancher level quality, and you don't even have to leave your house. Visit backyardbutchers.com/Deace, backyardbutchers.com/Deace, and use the promo code Deace, and you'll get 20% off at checkout. 20% off at checkout at backyardbutchers.com/Deace. Promo code Deace for 20% off.
You have this strange knack of doing the Backyard Butchers promo when I am the most hungry every single day, every single time that we have them on. But I got out ahead of you. I got a snack because I knew this was coming. I got a snack before this read.
There you go. All right, back to some Feedback Friday. Brady Robertson says, hope this finds you well. I've got an honest question regarding your point of view on the tariffs and the plan moving forward. Not trying to be snarky, just trying to understand your point of view. I have little regard for the overwhelming majority of media, and I think even right-wing media has become a carbon copy of the CNNs of the world. However, even if I don't agree with you on a subject, I at least trust you're going to come from an honest place. So why is it that you believe that higher taxes on the American people, or what is it you believe higher taxes on the American people via tariffs will accomplish? We can call them a tariff, but ultimately they are a tax. That burden will fall on the Americans just as higher business taxes do. The other countries may write the checks, but we will fund it. If the argument is we need to take our medicine due to out-of-control spending, I'm okay with that. I'm okay taking a burden for future generations, but if we're not going to cut spending, then this will be all for naught. And Congress shows no plan to take spending cuts seriously, and so far Trump has not been pushing for real quantitative cuts. All right, that is from Brady Robertson. All right, well, number one, Brady, you're actually asking the right questions. All right, you've tied the subject matters together well. Okay, we cannot have profligate spending driving up inflation. Although we did just have inflation drop here in the last report, but we can't have profligate spending driving up inflation on one hand, with an income tax, a punitive progressive income tax, and then we're going to make goods and the imported goods cost more money that Americans are used to be buying cheaply, cost more money on the other. Right? I completely agree. That would seem to undermine, on the surface, the whole idea here of we're doing this, what did Scott Bessent say this week? Madison Avenue has done very well under the last several administrations, and the Trump presidency for the next 4 years plans to make Main Street its priority more than Madison Avenue. I think Scott Bessent said something along those lines, right? Yeah. Okay. Now, I would argue, Brady, that there are more factors here than what you are considering. All right. First of all, there's a national security factor, right? The country we have the most punitive trade deficit with is also our biggest strategic rival in the world. They own more farmland than Bill Gates does. They own over 75% of the antibiotic supply, so they've got a grip on our food supply. They've got an iron grip on our medicine supply. And they just attempted to wreck the world with the virus they let leak from their lab accidentally or something. Yeah. What's that? Huh. And it was from a lab program that was overseen by their former heads of their biological weapons program, which I'm sure that's a coincidence. Weird one. Weird. But sure it's confident. It's a coincidence nevertheless. So there's that factor. We are being subversively invaded by China. The cheap goods you're buying are often things that were either inspired by, if not flat out, byproducts of American ingenuity, and they steal our intellectual property. They put it through their cheap labor distribution chain and then resell it back to us. That's not a trading partner. That's a chop shop. That's your, hey, we stole your car. We took it back to the garage, made a few modifications, and we're going to sell it right back to you. Well, it was your car. That's a chop shop. That's not a trading partner. So I think the national security aspects of this need to be elevated all the more, and I think factor heavily into the calculus here. But the other part of the calculus, and this is something, Aaron, you and I were talking about yesterday. There is a ratio. Of course, China's not just going to absorb those costs. And so, of course, the price of these goods is going to go up, okay? But you have to keep in mind, however, they have to mitigate on their end what that cost is as well. Did you see that they raised their tariffs against us today? From 84% to 124%. Meaning you are already paying an 84% tax on those goods. So now they're going to raise it on the other end. So you were getting them cheaply, but they were also being tariffed.
Mm-hmm.
They're just going to tariff them all the more. But why did they only go to 124%? Well, Steve, that's about what Trump raised their rates to. Correct. But if you're in a negotiation, why wouldn't you go even higher to make your point, right? Why wouldn't you exert your leverage if you had it? Right? If you had it, you'd exert your leverage, right? Player comes to you, thinks he deserves more money, and you make him an offer. He doesn't like the offer, but then you point out, well, have you seen your stats? Maybe you're not as good as you think you are. Because here's the thing, and this is what you and I were talking about yesterday, Aaron, off the air after the show. Who's buying most of these Chinese goods?
American consumers.
American consumers are. So, if indeed China decides to raise the tariffs on their end, or pass on the tariffs on Trump's end to us as consumers, we reach a price point where American consumers are like, I'll just buy from Vietnam. Let's get a big screen TV from Vietnam instead. They can pay that's another communist country. They can pay their people slave wages if they want. And they don't think that they have rights to New Zealand and the whole Pacific Rim. And they're not out there stealing our intellectual property at the rate China is. And they're really not much of a player in the broader national security landscape. Like they're not propping up Putin in Iran, for example, like China is. So I think, Brady, you have to understand, and people with your position have to understand, you guys operate as if the only side with something to lose here is our own. That's not the case, and it's not the case by a long shot. Now, listen to what I just said. Did I say we have nothing to lose? Is that what I said? Nope. And we've been talking about this all week long. Leverage points, runway. How much runway do you have? Okay. They have some leverage points for sure. They're on scholarship too. That's a good team over there. We don't like them. Don't like the way they conduct business. Don't like the way they do things. But they're not a bunch of schmucks. They got some smart guys over there too, some ruthless guys over there too, some cunning guys over there too, some intelligent guys over there too, some crafty dudes over there too. That's a good team over there. We're not disrespecting our opponent. We recognize this is a formidable foe. It's the battle number 1 seeds here in the Final Four. We recognize this. But you need to also, though, recognize that if it was just as simple as the American consumer and the American side of the equation is the only side that has something to lose, China would have put 500% tariffs on our goods long ago. They would have just invaded long ago. They have things to lose too. How quickly? If we're, the whole thing about playing chicken, this is, and maybe I should have done this earlier in the week. When you really examine this, let me try to make this as simple and accessible as possible. This is the flinch. This is the flinch point here. If this thing really goes full bore, right now I'm kind of jokingly calling it don't call it a Cold War. It's not a Cold War. I'm just half joking when I say that, but it could become one. Let's say this thing between the U.S. and China goes full-fledged Cold War. This becomes the choke point right here. What can happen first? We can replace China's cheaply made goods, or they can replace the U.S. consumer base buying them. That's really, there's going to be a lot of complicated theories and big words out there that are all true, okay, and all the but let's face it, we're all working a lot of hours. How much time do we have to absorb all of that and follow out of that, all of that, right? So, like they once asked a great theologian, summarize the Bible for me. Jesus loves me. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. There's more to it than that, but that's really the heart of it, really, right? Okay. So there's more to it than this, but let me make it as simple for you as possible. The choke point of this entire exercise is who can maneuver first? The U.S. pivoting to either things made domestically or by other foreign partners that can replace China's supply chain or China replacing the U.S. consumer base. That's really the choke point. And we're all sitting out there, in open waters, okay, with a Russian submarine. And that's the game we're playing here, okay? And you've got Sean Connery looking through the periscope. Are we going to launch a missile or am I going to defect? That's the choke point. The choke point really is who can move, who can replace the other one, who can decouple first. Can India and the EU provide enough middle-class consumers that China could say, you know what, how about 600% tariffs next week? Screw you. Can they do that? Or can we create our own domestic supply chains / different partners, amp up what we import from Taiwan, Vietnam, and some of these other countries that also can give us cheaply made goods? Is that fair? Is that kind of the simplest explanation of this entire thing, really? That's the bet, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, now that we've come down this far, but I just resent the constant tell where you're saying being a consumer is more important than being a citizen.
Yes.
I mean, Steve and I were raised under trickle-down economics. I get it. I appreciate it. But listen, if it's just about cheap goods, this is why you end up selling your birthright. And it doesn't matter what kind of other Americans have, as long as I'm comfortable. And we're going to ship all those jobs overseas. And then, hey, in order to make this thing keep happening, we can't even have a border. And we got to keep bringing in these illegals. Somebody's going to be the slave in your equation to make you comfortable, instead of saying, you know what, the America I want to live in, I want to be able to go to anywhere and have my kid go anywhere in college and have my daughter walk down any street and not have to worry about being raped or murdered. But we can't have that because we want cheap goods. You've made this thing with tariffs the very first thing in an economy. It should be the last conversation you have. You've got things totally backwards.
Yeah, so the conversation that we were having is the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors for President Trump is Stephen Miran. He wrote in November of 2024, a user's guide to, I think, restructuring the global economy. He's the one who penned the phrase, the Mar-a-Lago Accords, which I think is what we're getting to as we speak with these groups of countries who have already indicated they want to play ball with the United States. It is Stephen Miran's contention. It is his contention and analysis that the Chinese industrial base is so trained and so geared, their factories are set up so much leveraged to what? The U.S. consumer, the U.S. market. Mm-hmm. They have an inelastic export model. They can't just for fun, I did an interesting exercise last night on Grok. I asked Grok, I want you to list the top 10 countries with more than 300 million people and list them in order of their GDP per capita. Well, there's not 10 countries with 300 million people. The countries with more than 300 million people have, I think if we added these together real quick, I can pull this up real quick. If you added per capita GDP of China, India, and Indonesia, which is not quite 300 million people, it is not even half of the United States GDP per capita. What is this telling you? Are you tracking with me? What is this telling you? China can probably not overnight find a market capable of importing and consuming what America is capable of importing and consuming right now. That is Stephen Miran's contention. And so that's the gamble here. That's the gamble. So is China going to stimulate its own economy, print stimulus checks? Mm-hmm. So they start buying some more of their own products, their own overproduction? Are they going to start doing business with the EU? Are they going to start trying to do more business with India, exporting to India? The bottom line, and this is Stephen Miran's contention as well, there's just no substitute for American demand. So that is the leverage that we are playing right now. That's the leverage that we're playing. And they are exerting some leverage in more subtle ways over there. The only question becomes who cracks first. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be really difficult and interesting to see how this plays out, because Xi Jinping cannot afford to be seen as weak here. So I'm not really sure how this next, if this is truly a negotiation for a better, more fair deal with China, I'm not sure how that's going to happen, because it certainly seems like during the last tariff war, didn't mean to monopolize the time. During the last tariff war, you just said this, It was starting to look like we were going to get some better deals with China. Then, bada bing, bada boom, we had a viral illness, or we had a viral pandemic. It's going to be really interesting to see how they play it this time, because they've already played that card before.
Let's close with something cool. This is from Ryan Morford, and that's very well said, Aaron, by the way. Great analysis. Because of you, your team, and some other prominent voices of conservative values, I gained the courage to run for school board. I lost the first go-around by 3 votes in 2023. I'm proud to say I made the cut, and I won a seat on the local school board this go-around. I let God put me where he needs me, and then I just went to work. So here we go. Keep fighting the good fight, gentlemen. We need you.
Amen.
So what a great note to end the week on, man.
Yeah. I get notes. When I get notes like that, I'm pretty sure when I've been banging the drum on the need to get up and do that, I use the same smug and whatever tone you said at the beginning of the show. And you heard it differently, brother. God bless you. You win. Yes. And we all win because of you. That's a real man right there.
Amen, Ryan. Amen. Well done. Well done, good and faithful servant. All right, we're going to stick around, and we're going to do overtime here for Blaze TV subscribers. You're going to be able to watch that. It's our best and worst of the week coming up later today. We'll record it now. We'll upload it for you later at blazetv.com/Deace. Again, that's blazetv.com/Deace. For the rest of you, hope you enjoy a great spring weekend, and we'll be back again on Monday. Until then, Romans 8:28.